What's up, everybody? It's the last week of October. Feels like Halloween is around the corner. It's a scary, scary one. Kaizer Chiefs won, Liverpool are struggling. But today I want to talk to you about something that has been really deeply, deeply disturbing me. On my usual day, I normally go get a cup of coffee, and I get coffee from Mafiki, who is our barista in a store near my house. And whenever I go there, sometimes she tells me about what life is like and some of the things that she goes through in her own life. In a recent while, she was telling me a little bit more about a crime that took place in her neighborhood. In her words, in this township, 8 South Africans were rounded up, murdered, and then set on fire. Now, this story did not really make it into too much of the news. And two, what really even disturbed me is that in her words, the following day, when the police arrived, or the police arrived on the day, the following day, it felt like life had gone back to normal. That even though this avalanche of policemen had arrived, she says to me that she holds no hope that anything is going to happen. Last year, 24,000 South Africans were murdered. This tells a story of a country at war. It's a country that in many ways, to live in the township is to fear for your life. What shook me about this whole issue was I thought to myself, had it to be that this murder scene had taken place on a farm, my feeling is that, in essence, that whole issue would have now been discussed at the White House, and today we'd be regurgitating back about how there are farm murders. But yet, in truth, people living in townships are being killed. Now, it doesn't matter where murder takes place. Murder is murder. Whether it's in the farm, whether it's in the streets, 24,000 South Africans being killed is simply unacceptable. So yes, we can have a Madlanga Commission, which of course will investigate political interference into decision makings, whether it's to disband a political killings task team, all of those. And of course, we'll have an ad hoc committee in Parliament and have an investigation. And who knows, for good measure, in a few months, we will be observing 16 days of activism. And so we will have a march and talk about femicide. But in truth, I don't see too much action taking place in our country. I don't see action that is occurring in terms of dealing with probably the biggest factor to economic growth, disinvestment. It's the issue of safety. Now, we've been having multiple debates, and maybe constitutionally we agreed that the SAPs needed to remain a national competence. A few premiers, Premier Lisufi, Premier Windy, all decided that at some point they'd figure out how to create their forces within their own provinces, which is unconstitutionally illegal. But it is speaking to this key question. Why is it okay that we're okay with murder, whether it take place in the Cape Flats, in the townships, in the suburbs, in the farms? Why have we become okay with murder? The first couple of things that I think are absolutely crucial is that even with increased numbers of prosecutions, so what we call people who have been given life sentencing or lifers, in reality in 1994 that number was less. Today, that number is in the few thousands. So we've increased the number of people that we've put for life sentencing. And I know many people are like, yes, death penalty. But here's the problem. Even with that, the harsh sentence, the harshest sentencing, murder is still skyrocketing in this country. In the midst of that, the conviction for those who commit murder is 1 in 5. Which means you have an 80% chance of literally getting away with murder. So if we're serious, I think we need to really concentrate harder on this issue of crime. We need to do and take deliberate action. And the first is about getting the best leadership in the police. We cannot keep this revolving doors of police ministers. I would argue we need one who is competent, preferably one who was within the force, and appoint a police minister. The second is we must deal with the institutional capacity of policing. And this is something that really had disturbed me. In an answer that I sent to the Minister of Police, Feroz Kachalia, who's acting at this point in time, I asked him how many policemen have in fact been prosecuted in terms of the Independent Police Investigative Directorate, or the IPID. This is where people go and report cases when police are accused of rape or murder or all of that. And he tells me there were 14,907 open misconduct cases involving South African police services, including 1,486 cases of deaths linked to police action and 97 cases of rape by police officers. So here's the question. Of all of that, how much you think ended up in prosecution? And in truth, only 5% of the cases under investigation, after all of those numbers, have been successfully prosecuted. That tells you a story that when even the police themselves commit a crime or do something that needs to be investigated and prosecuted, nothing really happens. So that's why it limits police trust. It tells people that to go to the police is really taking a risk. It tells people that more than anything, that if the community cannot work with the police, the intelligence that sits within communities is limited. Because often, like I did, I lived in Soweto, in Dobsonville. I used to be able to know, oh, that one is accused of murder, that one is this. Or in that corner is where they sell drugs, or whatever. You need to have a relationship between communities and police so that we can be effective. The third is actually to listen carefully to what premiers are saying, which is that maybe we need to devolve some policing powers so that we can merge this idea of metro police and provincial police so that we have a bigger force and potentially work with private security so that the crooks know they must fear, not the other way around. And ultimately, when it comes to specialized crimes, whether it be femicide, whether it be rape, that we need specialized courts so that we can find conviction quicker, increase the number of people who end up in jail, rather than in fact having criminals run around. Fellow South Africans, if we don't deal with crime, let's forget investment, let's forget GDP growth, but more than anything, let's forget the safety of all of our citizens. I am a father to 2 girls and a boy, and often I fear for my girls because one day they'll start using Ubers, and I fear for them. Women in this country are about the only ones who can be able to say when they get into an Uber, perhaps they need to send a live location permanently because of the fear. And I'm not saying Uber is the problem. I'm merely saying we have a broad crime problem. And so here's the urgency. Once we've established the leadership, dealt with crooked police, ensuring that we devolve some policing powers, give intelligence back to local ground and make sure that the Inspector General or intelligence is in fact put together in a manner that can help the police make sure we're effective at solving crimes. Let's ultimately then deal with the politicians who then enable gangs, crime lords, drug dealers to be able to get away with evading justice because they are complicit in the murder and the victimization of our people. Now is the time to act. And I want to challenge here in Parliament that we need to reform policing, we need to act with urgency and keep our citizens safe. We cannot afford it now. It's time that we act, and we don't need to be told to act by anyone, because ultimately I fear that this government governs as though no lives matter. It governs as though ultimately the quality, the value of life doesn't matter. I close with this thought. All of us need to remind ourselves that we are all under one law, and we need to do our best to protect that law. We have to make sure that that we remind ourselves the value of Ubuntu. The idea that human life is precious and that I see the divine in another human being. And so when we bring back those values, let us govern in such a manner that makes sure that every life, regardless of where it is valued. And that the threats that face all of us, just because you live in a suburb or you live in a farm, in a township, all of us are victims of crime. So until all of us are safe, none of us are safe. Much love to all of you all. Let's touch base next week. Much.